Joined by current Dal Tigers head coach and former Mount Saint Vincent Mystics coach. And today we're going to talk about Abe Toulany. Of course, you're a former player, and I just want to start off by asking how you got to know him, how you started recruiting him at the first tournaments that you saw him play.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I can remember exactly the first time I really saw him play was his grade 11 year. He played in the All-Star game, and it happened to be at CPA, Charles P. Allen High School, where I taught. So I was watching the game, and really didn't know too much about him. Hadn't really saw him play, but I heard that he's a double-double man, and not usually that's 10 and 10, but in high school he was 20 and 20. 20 points a game, 20 rebounds a game. So he's very impressive. He's undersized, always been undersized. So in his grade 12 year, I watched him, and I can remember both he and I think it was Derek Norris. Was it Derek or Devin? Might have been Devin. I was recruiting both of them, and they were in the tournament at Eastern Shore High School, and I had talked to him a little bit, and he was really excited. The one thing I always said about Abe was that if he was 3 or 4 inches taller, you know, there would have been no stopping him because he really was 5'11", and I can remember games he'd be going up against guys 6'7", 6'8", and totally dominating them. So I mean, I don't think he was really that highly recruited by any AUS because of his size. And in high school, he was more of a forward. He wasn't a guard. He developed later into a guard after he left the Mount. But really, that's how it happened. And I just spoke to him, and he's very modest, very humble, very approachable guy, the consummate gentleman. I mean, when I think of Abe, off the court, you wouldn't find a nicer guy. And like we were talking earlier, on the court, it's Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. Rip your head off if he has to win. And that's one of the reasons, just the intensity that he brought every day. And I mean, I love the kid like a son. Well, he's not a kid anymore, but he's one of those guys over 25 years or almost 30 years of coaching now that every time I think of Abe, he just makes me smile.
You mentioned that Eastern Shore tournament. I'm really curious as to, specifically towards his game, what did you see and what did you like that you thought would affect and bring good to your team at the Mount?
Well, first of all, just the intensity. You can't coach that. You can't teach that. It's just there. It came from within. And like I said, even though he was undersized, he played much bigger than he was. So in the ACAA, as opposed to the AUS, size matters. But, having played in the AUS and coached in the AUS and ACA, I've been, involved basketball around here for 35 years. He would have played in the AUS and he would have done fine. There's no doubt in my mind because he would want it more than anybody else. And so what he would lack in, let's say, physical attributes, size, just height. I mean, because strength-wise, I had three guys: Stevie Morris, Damian Gay, and Abe. But I called my three pit bulls. And when they were together, and they played together. I think their league record was something like 112-2. They refused to lose. And Abe was just that. I'll tell you what else made Abe special. He's a team first guy. The 1 year we had Jason Carlson, who came from Seattle, Washington, 6'8" guy when we went to the national final. And Abe gave up his starting spot, and he still played a ton. But, with Abe, it was always team first. And, I just think that his heart, his desire, his intensity, his desire to get better every day. A lot of times kids would just work, kids would show up and go through the motions. Abe would never do that. Abe just wanted to be the best he could be, and he's done very well.
Well, talking about how great of a player he is and how dedicated he is, still holding the all-time rebounding record and points record for the Mount Saint Vincent Mystics. So, how special is that for him to have those records and to be able to cherish those?
Well, I'll tell you, I'm not surprised. Abe is very astute when it comes to numbers in that regard because over the years we've had some, especially some of my earlier teams with Andrew and Anthony McNeil and Dan mentioned Damian Gay, but Damian was only there for 3 years. So some of the guys that were really good rebounders over my 25 years there, they only played 4 years. Abe was there for 5. So I have no doubt that Abe would be number one. And, for somebody to be at the top, he's well deserving. He would be kind of like your poster child that would be typical of somebody that would be a board man like Abe.
Well, he mentioned to us that he was at the Nationals. You guys went so far with that team. He was an ACAA All Star as well, and we really want to know what separates him from other players. You talk about his intensity, but if you could just elaborate on him compared to certain other players in the league, what really sticks out for Abe?
Well, I think there are a few. He I think Abe probably went to the national tournament every year he was at the Mount. Maybe his first year. I think we might have lost in overtime in the ACAs. I think we might have lost Kings that year. But he went 4 times, and his first or second year, we were seeded 8th, and we were playing the number 1 team. Actually, it was at Sheridan in Brampton, Ontario. And it was the first time that a number 1 team had lost to a number 8 team in the tournament. And they had a couple of big boys. And the pivotal point of the game was when they're all Canadian. It was Fraser Valley. He and Abe hit heads. And the guy went down. He was bleeding like a stuck pig, and they had to tape him up, and he was done for the night. And Abe just got up, shook his head, and just went on. And I think that's sort of typical of Abe. I mean, if you were ever in a fight, you'd have to kill him. That's the way I always described him. He's just his desire, his intensity, and as driven and as motivated and as tough as he was on the court, off the court. He's a gentleman. Thank you, please. His mom and dad did a great job raising him, and it's just he just always wanted to be the best he could be, and he had certain goals that he was motivated to achieve. And he played in Lebanon, and he played professionally, and he played locally here for the Rainmen. So I just think that just the innate intrinsic drive and desire to be the best he could be. And for anybody who said that he couldn't do it because he was too small, he's the kind of guy that would take that sort of doubt or criticism and use it for jet fuel. And that's what he did.
Well, he played all 5 years for the Mount, and Abe mentioned to us he was the first player to actually cover those 5 years. So, we just want to know what he meant to the Mount program.
Oh, he was the heart and soul of our teams. And, I think, first of all, very few freshmen for me start, and he started as a freshman. So that's number one. And, it's one thing to rely on him to do what he has to do because he could score, he could rebound, and he's the kind of guy that brings I don't think courage is the right word, but he instills a lot of fearlessness in his teammates, because when they see what he's like and what he brings, it just gives them almost like a shot of adrenaline, because they would know that he would always play so hard, always, regardless of the size difference. He would never back down, and he would have their backs too. And I'll tell you, he was a winner. He just refused to lose. And, there were games, obviously we did lose games, but, it wasn't for a lack of effort on his part. And, even after he graduated, I see him now, he was one of, when we won the AUS last year, there were a ton of Mount guys there, my former players. And, he's always at our games, and he comes and visits. And, like I said, he's like a son to me. And he's somebody that, literally, he's one of those kind of guys that you love to have on your team, but you hate to play against for the reasons that we already talked about.
Well, you mentioned that he played overseas in Lebanon, and you also mentioned he's undersized. And as an undersized player that has that intensity, Abe told us that he was matched up against the import players and typically the best guards on the opposing team. So he also credited the defensive systems that you taught him and the defense that you really encouraged him to play. What do you think that he learned from you, and how impressed are you that he went on to play in Lebanon?
Well, I'll tell you, for him, for any of my former players, but for him in particular, to be able to live out the dream. It's not the NBA, but he's still playing pro. And Abe's a native, Lebanon, and both his parents were born in Lebanon, so it was kind of appropriate. They had a chance to go to, the country of his parents' birth, and unfortunately, because of all the civil strife over there, that they've had to, scale back the league a little bit. But I think there are a lot of things. A lot of people know that I taught high school for close to 33 years, and I think with my students and with my players, I try to challenge them every day to get the best out of them. And some days they would hate me, but I think after all said and done, me driving and pushing and just trying to get every little bit of energy and effort out of them, it's kind of like when you look back after it's all said and done. I think most, not all, but most players or students that I have knew that I had their best interest at heart. And I think just some of the intangibles, working hard, and a lot of the skills, we definitely stress defense. But I know as a pro over in Lebanon, he became a guard, and to me that's kind of phenomenal too, because at the Mount we didn't need him to play guard. I mean, we didn't have a lot of big guys, so he was forced to play inside, guard the bigger guys. But yeah, that's a testament to his commitment to being the best he could be, that he developed a handle and could guard guards who were probably in some cases a lot quicker. But I think yeah, he learned a little bit from me, but I think a lot of it was that what he took and what he built on, and how much he really wanted to play overseas.
Well, you described that players can kind of learn from his work ethic. Would you describe him as a big leader on your Mount Mystics team?
Yeah, he was. He's one of those kind of guys. He could be vocal, but he wasn't always. It was sort of like he led by example, and he was quiet. But there would be times when he had enough,
Okay.
and then he'd let you know. So there was kind of like a tipping point for him to explode. But he just led by example, and just when you see somebody working that hard every day, and the rest of the guys not, well, he pretty much by example, brought their level of play up to where it had to be.
Okay. During the 2006 conference finals versus King's College, Abe recalls his memorable rebound falling out of bounds and calling a timeout. And following this season, you guys went back to back and had undefeated seasons. If we were to tell a coach or a scout right now about Abe's play, and if he wanted to continue to play, what would you tell them about him?
Well, first of all, I would say that what he lacks in just skill set or size, he would more than make up for with effort, energy, intensity. There's nothing he wouldn't do for the betterment of the team. He's a very, very, very coachable young man, and he's gonna listen to what the coach says. He's team first, and I think really what he brings, like I said, if he had to guard quicker guards, he might have to struggle a little bit. But I know that he's developed some of guard his guard skill set since he left the Mount. So, but it's just his attitude, his coachability, his work ethic, his commitment and desire, and he just wants the best. He just he doesn't monkey around. He doesn't want to waste time. He doesn't want to waste energy. He's all business on the court, and when he crosses the lines, he's going to bring 100% every time without having to be told.
When you talk about coachability, let's just talk about when you tell him something at a practice or during a game. How easy is it for him to take that in, develop it, and work to fix that?
Well, I'll tell you, over the years, I mean, Abe was, like I said, he was amazing, but every once in a while, his temper would get the best of him, and he never missed a practice due to an injury. And the only time he really missed a game is when I had to, have him sit out a game for an outburst that. It was just the intensity, but there's a time and a place, I would tell him, and as difficult as it was for him, he took it like a man, and worked hard to make sure that it never happened again. But it wasn't because he was being trying to undermine me, or it was just that his intensity just got the best of him a couple of times. And you know what? That's not necessarily a bad thing. It's better to have it that way than not being intense at all. Yeah.
Just overall basketball IQ, if you could just touch on what you saw through Abe from just high school and now even.
Well, I mean, number one, he's a gamer and he's a lifer. He loves basketball. Basketball's been great to him. He's put an awful lot into it. And like I said, if he had eligibility left, I'd take him right now. He'd be playing for me. There's no doubt about it. I'd take him in a heartbeat. And I think again because Abe's getting up there. I'm not quite sure how old he would be. You might know, but I think as soon as they get the civil strife straightened away over there in Syria and Lebanon and the Middle East, I'm sure he'll go back when it's safe. He had a number of stories telling me what it would be like to play over there and going through guard checkpoints and machine guns and guard dogs and all sorts of stories. So I think if that opportunity arises again, I'm pretty sure he'll do it as long as his body will let him do it. But I wouldn't. If I got a call from a coach asking me about him, he's a 10.
Last question. One word to describe Abe. One word.
Awesome.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks a lot for joining me, and I'm sure Abe will love the things you said about him.
Well,
thank you.
Most of them. Thanks a lot. I appreciate it, Andrew. He never missed a practice, even when he had ankles. Never missed a practice. Nobody worked any harder.